My name is Caroline Betancourt, and I'm just presenting my observation article or my observation notebook today. For my kindergarten class that I went to observe, I went to Warren Dupree Elementary and I observed Miss Brown. It was your typical kindergarten class. It was very colorful. It had a lot of posters all over the place. On one wall there was the ABCs, and then on the other wall was a bunch of artwork done by students. And when I first came into the class, the students were very respectful to Miss Brown and everything, though they were kindergarten students, so they were a little all over the place. They were instructed to sit in their seats when I first came in the class, and they just handed out a packet of papers to each of the students, and they just had simple little coloring pages on there, and Miss Brown was giving a lesson about safety, and the coloring pages went along with her lesson, but they were instructed to hold off on the coloring until she was done with her lesson, which of course a couple of them went ahead and colored, but she went ahead with the lesson and finished it, and then they were allowed to color, and they had fun with that. One little boy, I think, might have had ADD or ADHD in the class. He was just very wiggly the whole time. He liked to move around. At one point, he was on the floor because he had leaned his chair back and fallen out of his seat. But I think he seemed to be one of the ones that may have been exceptional. And of course, that young, we are not sure if they are or not. My next observation was for first grade, and I was at Warren Dupree Elementary still, and I went to Miss Kickler's classroom, and she was very gracious. She was very nice. She showed me where I could sit and observe. On that particular day, the students that had good behavior had been given an opportunity to purchase donuts. And so that was the class that they were getting their donuts in. It was whenever I was in there. So of course they were extremely excited about that. Her classroom, she ran it a little bit more loosely, you could say, which I don't think is a bad thing. They were first graders, so much like kindergartners, they're going to be rambunctious and they're going to be all over the place just because, they're children. But she let them come up to her desk if they had a question. When I walked in, I think there was 4 or 5 students, at her desk, which for me might get a little overwhelming if I just had 4 or 5 students constantly at my desk trying to talk to me. But she seemed to handle it really well. She had been doing it for a while, so she knew what she was doing. But she got them all seated and in their seats, and got the ones that had purchased donuts, gave them their snack. So they were very excited, and they grew a little bit quieter once they got their donuts. They were enjoying them. And then one little boy, she started giving a lesson after they finished their donuts, and one boy would not sit still. He wouldn't be quiet, and he wouldn't sit correctly in his seat, and Miss Kickler instructed him multiple times. She said, "You need to sit in your seat correctly," and he wouldn't listen, and she got on the dojo, which I love that. But she got on the dojo, and I'm not exactly sure how it works, but she hit the button that let his parent know that he had misbehaved, and he threw a fit. He screamed, and he threw himself on the floor. And then another teacher, I don't know honestly who they were, but they were an employee of the school, and they came in and got him to calm down a little bit and talked to him pretty sternly for a couple minutes, and then took him out of the room for several minutes, and then he eventually came back in. And once he came back in, he was perfectly fine. He acted like nothing had happened. For my second grade observation, I was again at Warren Dupree, and I observed Miss Jackson's classroom. And when I first came in, they were taking a practice test, and then after they spent several minutes letting she let them work on the practice test for several minutes, and then once everybody had finished up, she called them over to the carpet in front of the smartboard, and she blew up the test that they had been working on onto the smartboard. And I really appreciated how she worked diligently through each and every problem. I think it was like a reading comprehension test. And they had little short stories or excerpts or even poems that they had to read. And then they would just answer questions that had to do with the stories. And basically, they were looking for reading comprehension and just making sure that they read the story and got what the story was trying to say. And she made each student read out loud, which I love that because to me, reading is one of the most important things that you can learn in school. Obviously, especially for elementary school students. Reading is going to be something that you're going to need that skill for the rest of your life, reading and writing. So she made each of them read out loud, which was great. And she helped them, if they were struggling with a word or something, she helped them along and they moved on. And then she went through each and every question and, asked the students what answer did you get and why. And I really liked that she had them explain, why they got the answer that they did. And then they also used in that class, she used a clip up, clip down behavior chart. And a couple students had to clip down while I was in there. And I think that's really good because it gives them a visual of, oh, I messed up. And now my clothespin is down on the chart. They don't like seeing that. So I think that's a really effective way of discipline. I think it works. For my third grade, we had to do third grade special education resource. And I was at Pinewood Elementary, and I observed Miss Ellison's class. There was a couple third graders in here, and then I think one or two fourth and fifth graders. So she had, a couple different age groups in there. Miss Ellison was very nice. She was standing over there talking to me whenever she had a particular student, he was a boy, come up to her, and he was fine. He was very nice, and he was just asking her a question, I think, and she wrapped her arm around him and squeezed him real tight. And I kind of thought that was odd for a second, but then I was like, maybe she's just real loving. She's a real loving teacher. But then she asked him, something about, do you feel better now? Does that make you feel better? And he nodded his head. So I didn't really know what was going on there. But then, I went and sat down and the class moved on and everything. And eventually they were working on something, and another student told him he was wrong about something. And he lost it. He screamed. He started crying. He was yelling at the top of his lungs. He got up and threw his chair up under the table, and then stormed off and went and crawled down on the floor and just was screaming and crying. And then another teacher from across the hall immediately came over with a vest and put it on him. And I didn't ask Miss Ellison about it, but she did say that he was either autistic or Asperger's. I think they were still trying to figure out which one, but he just couldn't handle, someone telling him that he's wrong about something when he wasn't even wrong about it. The other student was, but he just couldn't handle that mentally, I guess. But the vest helped. The vest calmed him down. I went home and looked up, what is this vest? What does it do? How is it helpful? And I'm assuming it was a weighted vest that, just like her wrapping her arm around him, that constant pressure and that sensory input that they're getting calms down a lot of children with Asperger's or autism. So I thought that was really interesting, and I'm glad that I got to kind of witness that and see how that works, especially with the vest. For my fourth grade, I was again in Miss Ellison's classroom. She just had fourth grade at a different time. She had a few more fourth graders in there this time. And there was one student in there who I'm pretty sure he had ADHD because he was very fidgety, very looking around constantly, looking at different things. He had to constantly be moving some part of his body, either his hand or have a piece of paper in his hand flapping it or moving his leg. And she later did tell me that he is ADHD. Um, so I'm glad I got to see, how ADHD students really are in the classroom. For my fifth grade observations, I went to Miss Harris's classroom in at the Lonoke Elementary School. And when I went in, they were working on a word problem. She had put a math word problem up on the screen, and they worked through it. And she was very good about, asking them to explain their work and asking them to work it out on the paper and not just, put the answer down, circle it, but to actually take the time to do all the processes on the paper. I thought that was very good. Another thing that I noticed in her classroom, I saw in her classroom, was she used GoNoodle, which I guess is a website I think it's free, that is dances. It's just silly dances and songs that go along with it, and they last for 2 or 3 minutes, and the class loved it. They were all over it. They enjoyed it immensely. They were singing and dancing along very enthusiastically. And I think that's great, just to get some of that energy out, because, they're children, they're going to have energy. And getting some of that pent-up energy out so that they can go on with their day and focus is, I think, a great thing. And I think GoNoodle really, really helped with that. Made them able to focus a little bit more. For my 6th grade special education, I went to Lonoke Middle School, and I observed Kathy Carson. There was only 2 students in this class while I was in there, and one was just working on a project that he had been doing for another class. He had made she showed me some of the programs that he was using, and he had made it was like a PowerPoint, but it wasn't PowerPoint. It was something on Google. I think it was called Google Slide. He had made a project, like a PowerPoint about Ireland on there, and he was very proud of it, and he was showing it off to me, telling me about it and showing me the different ways he could do stuff and the different ways he could put backgrounds on there and put words on there. So she just showed me a lot of cool things on the internet that I could use in my classroom one day. And then she also showed me a IEP. They were getting ready to do their annual review, which is kind of like parent-teacher conferences. So she showed me an actual IEP and kind of familiarized me with it a little bit, and told me, as a general ed teacher, you'll see this and this and this, and this is kind of what we do with it. So that was really informational, and I appreciated her, taking the time to sit down and show me all that a whole lot. Then I went to 5th grade, Gifted and Talented, and I did that at Admiral Taylor Elementary School, and I observed Mrs. Wren's Gifted and Talented class. And they call it Alpha there, which is actually what I called it at my, that's how I knew it at my elementary school. I loved it. I was in Alpha, so I kind of have a soft spot for, Gifted and Talented and Alpha kids or children. They actually played a game that I thought was pretty challenging. I had some issues with it, and it was called Contig, and I explain it all in my observation notebook. But I thought that game was super. It was awesome. It was challenging, but they loved every second of it. They just Gifted and talented students, at least these that I observed today, you can tell that they just want knowledge. They hunger for knowledge. They want to know more. They want to know why this works this way, and they want to know how this works, and they want to have conversation with you about, what you think and what they think and why they think that way. And she did an awesome job of really stimulating that and asking them, well, explain to me why you think this way, or explain to me, they looked at a Time magazine for kids, is what it's called, and she had them point out their favorite article and said why. She just asked them. She just had them explain to her, why is this my favorite article? And it really made them think. And you could tell that they really just enjoyed it. It was fun for them. For my inclusive site, I went to Pathfinder Academy and I observed Mrs. Elisa Hooper. And I think she's in charge over there, and she is also actually in the classroom. She's a occupational therapist, I believe she said. And there was a lower functioning class and a higher functioning class over there. The lower functioning class, for the most part, don't speak, and if they do speak, they don't speak much, and they don't speak well. The higher functioning ones could speak. They could get sentences and ideas out. So they were just focused on, building social skills and, how do we act and why do we act, a certain way, especially in public. Just kind of those things. But I was in the lower functioning class. And it was very eye-opening. Just, seeing how, I don't want to say helpless, but how much these children, depend on others to help them because they can't do much on their own. They do need help a lot of the time. They need help doing simple things. One little girl in there, she didn't say a word the entire time I was in there. She didn't, I don't even think she made a sound. And she would rock back and forth sometimes. But she had a talker. And it was just an iPad, and it had a program on it to where she could hit certain buttons, and it would say things for her because she didn't speak. But she obviously, knew what was going on. She understood what you were saying to her because she would hit buttons on her talker, and it would, if you asked her, what's your father's name? She even could hit buttons on there, and it would say, my father's name is Bob, or whatever. So I thought that was really cool. And that was I think it was an example of, assistive technology. Yeah, that our book talked about. So that's just, I appreciate how much technology has helped these children and adults, be able to have a little bit more independence, because without that iPad, we wouldn't know what she wanted to say. We wouldn't know what she wanted to do. But with that iPad, she was able to get out, hey, I want to do this, or hey, I want to do that, or, hey, I understand what you're asking, and I can answer it. So I thought that was just really cool. It really stuck out to me, and kind of made me realize, this is what exceptional children is kind of a lot of it's about, is students with, whether it be autism or Asperger's or, ADHD or dyslexia or gifted and talented students. It's just, it's all of it. And it's a very big range, but it's a very interesting range. And I think it's awesome. And I know I went way over my time. I'm sorry. I was trying to speak fast. But that was my observations for my exceptional children class.